Hello and good morning, students. Today today is Monday. So despite that today is a public holiday, um, I intend to give you this recorded lesson, okay, just to keep you occupied, and so that we will not waste more time, yeah, because I'm still under quarantine, under self-isolation. So it seems like this week. Um, we're gonna rely on more online. We're gonna rely on online lessons. Okay, let's go straight to the learning objectives. We are going to cover a few learning objectives here, particularly the first one, describe the features of endocrine system, and then we look at the features, compare between nervous system and endocrine system, and then we're going to look at the neurons, and then finally we're going to look at uh, before that, outline the role of sensory receptor cells in detecting stimuli and stimulating the transmission of impulses in sensory neurons, and then finally future selection number 5, describe the sequence of events that results in action potential in a sensory neuron using a chemoreceptor cell in a taste bud, in the human taste bud. So the keyword here is only describe. Okay, the first thing that we're going to look at is we're going to look at objective number 1. Describe the features of endocrine system. So in an endocrine system, uh, when we mention about endocrine system, of course we're going to talk about hormones. Okay, the key term here is hormones, and then there are examples of hormones include is stated here: ADH, glucagon, and then insulin. Okay, and then number 2, what produces the hormones? The glands. Glands are the organs that produce hormones. And then number 3, the hormones are released into the bloodstream. Okay, so the features of our endocrine system is that, of course, the chemical substance, the chemical name is called hormones. Okay, hormones, and then these are released by glands. Okay, and then the hormones are released directly into the bloodstream. So, for example, when we talk about the ADH hormone, this is by the hypothalamus. The glucagon is by the alpha cells, and then the insulin is by the beta cells, okay, of the pancreas, of the isolates of Langerhans. um, so these are the features of the basic features of the endocrine system is that they are produced by glands, they are produced directly into the bloodstream, and then uh, they are produced by glands. They are secreted directly into the bloodstream, and there are different types of hormone as well. Yeah, there are some are not um, lipid soluble, some are lipid soluble. Okay, and that is no longer mentioned in the syllabus. Okay, so topic number 15, we're gonna look at control and coordination of the neurons and the nerve impulse. So if we now look at objective number 2, compare the features of the nervous system and the endocrine system. Now, we have. I'm about to introduce to you the nervous system. Okay, just an introduction. Um, so in order to compare, yeah, compare means we're looking at differences. although we can look at the similarities, but normally if you want to understand more, then we it's better that we look at the differences. Okay, now let's talk about the hormones first, because hormones, we have covered this. So the type of the endocrine system, sorry, we look at the endocrine system. The type of signal in the endocrine system is called hormones, produced by glands. How do they travel? How does the signal travel to the body, into the bloodstream? The speed of response is slow, yeah? The speed of response is slow because it has to travel into the bloodstream, yeah? It has to follow the flow of the blood and so on. The duration of the response can be in minutes, can be days, can be very, very long, like even up to weeks. The range of its effect is widespread. Okay, so for example, when we look at the hormone insulin, for example, when we look at the hormone insulin, okay, it will target skeletal muscles. Apart from the liver, so apart from the liver, it will also target skeletal muscles. So you can see skeletal muscles are everywhere in our bodies. Yeah, so the effect is widespread. And then there are some examples here. Growth, for example, growth hormone and the development of the reproductive system. All right. When we look at the nervous system, on the other hand, they use a different type of chemical, and that is nerve impulse, as well as neurotransmitters. So they use two different types of chemicals. Nerve impulse, is also referred as electrical impulse, and then neurotransmitters. So these are secreted by neurons. Secreted by neurons. So how do they travel? Along nerves? Okay, meaning inside a nerve. So when you compare with hormones, they are released into the bloodstream, yeah, meaning arteries, veins, capillaries. Whereas nerve impulse and neurotransmitters, they travel along nerves, okay. And inside nerves consist of many neurons, many neurons and many different types of neurons. The speed of the response. Now, if we look at the examples like blinking of eye, yeah, the blinking of your eyes, for example. So of course, the speed of response is very, very fast and very, very rapid, and it will last very, very short, yeah, in terms of millisecond. Even movement of the limbs, contraction, relaxation, it occurs very, very fast. And the range of effect is very localized, meaning it's very, very specific areas. Like if it's only for the eye, then it's only for the eye. If it's only for the upper limb, it's only for the upper limb. Yeah, very, very specific area as compared to endocrine system, which is very, very widespread. Okay, so this is stated, yeah, this is stated in the learning objectives, which is objective number 2. So you have to know the differences between nervous system and then endocrine system. So you'll have to look at what releases the chemical, what are the chemicals, in what form, okay, where are they released, and then what about the response, the speed of the response, the duration of response, the range of effects, and then some examples. Okay. Right, so because we're going to look at the nervous system, so these are some of the questions that you should pose. Yeah. For example, how does your body control the heartbeat, blinking of the eyes, regulate body temperature? What about the reflex action? I'm pretty sure you've heard this before, or you've studied this before, also known as the knee-jerk the knee-jerk action. how does your body know when to immediately withdraw your fingertips when it touches sharp objects or a very hot kettle? Okay, these are the questions that you should be asking, so that after this lecture, some of your questions, not all, yeah, but because this is just the first lecture, some of your questions will be answered. Right. Very, very briefly on the mammalian nervous system. This is not in your syllabus, but it's just for your knowledge. The mammalian nervous system consists of the central nervous system and then the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system are the brains and the spinal cord. That means this part here, brain and the spinal cord. Okay. And then the peripheral nervous system consists of sensory motor neuron, which is divided into these different types of nerves. Yeah? The cervical nerve, thoracic nerve, lumbar nerves, and then sacral nerve. Okay, so when we talk about the nervous system, it consists of CNS, central nervous system, and then the peripheral nervous system. The CNS, brain and spinal cord. The peripheral nervous system consists of motor, sensory neuron, and then motor neuron, and then basically these are the ones, the peripheral nervous system. Okay, as you can see here, central nervous system, peripheral nervous system. Regardless of these names, basically they are made up of these nerves: spinal, cranial. This is from an old textbook, yeah, but this is the latest one: cervical, thoracic, lumbar, and then sacral. Okay, how does the nervous system control and coordinate our actions? So it's very much like the homeostasis, the principles of homeostasis. There has to be a stimulus, and there's a missing one here, which is receptor, sensory neuron. The sensory neuron will send information to the central nervous system, and then the central nervous system will send to the effector via the motor neuron, and then the effector can be glands, it can be muscles, yeah? And then the response. So taken from another textbook, as you can see here, stimuli, so it can be external or internal, receptor, and then here this is sensory neuron will send the message to the nervous system, and the nervous system to the effector. This is the motor neuron, and then the effector, examples of effectors of muscles and gland, and then this is the response. Okay, so stimulus, receptor, sensory neuron, and then motor, effector, examples are muscles and gland. The response are the actions, like normally response is like blinking of the eye, contractions of the biceps or relaxation of the biceps, withdrawal of your fingertips, yeah, due to muscle contraction. So these are the examples of the different types of response. All right, the basic functional unit of a nervous system are called neurons. Okay, neurons, basic functional unit. Just like when we learn the kidneys, the basic filtering unit is called nephron. Yeah, the basic filtering unit is called nephron, whereas in the nervous system, the basic functional unit is called neuron. And the types of neuron, there are many, many different types of neuron. Okay, just to name a few: motor neurons, sensory neuron, and then interneuron. Interneuron has also other names, such as relay neuron or connector neuron, relay neuron or connector neuron. So there are many different types of neurons. Right, so let's learn the names. So now we're actually moving into the third learning objectives. Yeah? Describe structure, function, sensory neuron, motor neuron, intermediate neurons. Okay, third learning objectives. So sensory neuron, they carry nerve impulse. Now these names here is very, very critical. Nerve impulse. Names are very, very important. Okay, so normally we say nerve impulse or electrical impulse, but we don't normally call these messages. Yeah? So if you write down messages, carry messages, it's wrong. I think the best term would be impulse. Yeah, impulse, or nerve impulse, or electrical impulse. So carry nerve impulse from receptor cells. Okay, we'll talk about these receptor cells in more detail, such as pain receptor, heat receptor, pressure receptor, towards the brain and the spinal cord or the central nervous system. That's why you need to know the CNS. That's why before we introduce you, yeah, what is meant by the mammalian nervous system. So the mammalian nervous system, we have to learn this. Yeah. Okay, and then for the motor neuron, carry the nerve impulse from the CNS to the effector. Okay, a very good example of all this would, if we look at the reflex arc. Yeah, I will show you later on. So sensory neuron, nerve impulse, carry nerve impulse or transmit nerve impulse from the receptor to the central nervous system, whereas motor neuron from the central nervous system to the effector. Okay, from the effector. So there are a lot of keywords here. Receptor to CNS, CNS to effector. So what do they carry? Nerve impulse, nerve impulse. Examples of effector include muscles and glands. Okay, we will look at the basic structure of a typical neuron, and that is the motor neuron. Okay, so this is a motor neuron. So let's learn the features. Okay, so a motor, any neuron will always have a cell body. Okay, a cell body, and then now before that, a motor neuron. See, a motor neuron means this is one cell. Yeah, a single cell. So what you see here is actually a single cell. Okay, a single cell. One cell, one neuron. Here it's called motor neuron. Okay, so this is the nucleus. This is the nucleus here. Okay. This is the cytoplasm. Okay, this is of course the cell membrane. Okay, now this area here, this part here, a long extension of the cytoplasm. Yeah, long extension of the cytoplasm is called axon. Yeah, so this is called axon here. Okay, and then this long extension here will be wrapped by Schwann cell. Okay, and the stuffs, the material that is wrapping this axon is called myelin shield. Okay, in areas where there is no myelin shield, like this one here, is called rod of Ranvier. Knot of Ranvier, knot of Ranvier, knot of Ranvier, knot of Ranvier. And this is the nucleus of the Schwann cell, which is wrapping this axon. Yeah. And towards the end here is called synaptic terminal. There are many names. This, it can be called synaptic terminal, synaptic knob, synaptic bulb. Okay, synaptic knob, synaptic bulb, or synaptic terminal. Okay, there are three names that you can use. And then over here is this is the cell body just now, cell body. Uh, this part here is called dendrites. This part here is called dendrites. Okay, dendrites. Now, dendrites is also a very small extension of the cytoplasm. Yeah, very small extension of the cytoplasm, and this is to increase the surface area to receive the incoming nerve impulse, yeah, from other neurons. Okay, so there might be neurons here, neurons here, neurons here, neurons here, neurons here. So it's basically receiving that nerve impulse from other neurons. So it's also to increase the surface area. Okay. So this, remember just now, it's called dendrites. Dendrites. Okay, so this is the direction of impulse. Direction of impulse. Here we have one motor neuron, yeah, a motor neuron. In in real life, if I can just so if it's a motor neuron here, yeah, motor neuron. So normally a motor neuron is connected with another with another motor neuron, yeah, and then with another motor neuron until it reaches the effector. Okay, so it's not only a single motor neuron. Okay, these motor neurons are connected with another motor neuron, and likewise with sensory neuron as well. So we can have a sensory neuron, we can have a receptor here, and sensory neuron connects to another sensory neuron, connects to another sensory neuron until it reaches the central nervous system. Okay, so what you see here is only one particular cell, yeah, a cell of a motor neuron, which can be quite long. Yeah? It says here, I think about see, about 1 meter. Axons can be over 1 meter in length. Okay, meaning it can be a very long cell, or it can be a short one. It says it can be. So can be means can be means it's not always 1 meter long. Yeah, sometimes it can be very, very short. Okay, so learn the features. Yeah, learn the features, very, very important. Of course, in the exam, questions can be presented to you in terms of labeling and so on. Okay, and let's look at another from another textbook here. Okay, now you can see the dendrites. Okay, the dendrites, the nucleus. So this part here is called the cell body. Okay, okay, and you see the myelin shield. Yeah, you can see the Schwann cell here. This is the nucleus of that Schwann cell. So it wraps around the axon. Yeah, this substance called myelin shield. Yeah, which acts as insulator or electrical insulator. Okay, so the myelin shield, the purpose of the myelin shield is to act as electrical insulator. Okay, and this is the knot of Ranvier. Knot of Ranvier, this area here are the knots of Ranvier. What is knots of Ranvier? Knots of Ranvier are areas where there is no myelin shield. Yeah, see, there's no myelin shield here. No myelin shield. Okay, so synaptic terminal. Remember, there are many names to this: synaptic knob, synaptic bulb. Yeah, those are the different names that can be used. Okay, right. So here is another motor neuron, as you can see here. You can see the dendrites, okay, dendrites, myelin shield, so direction of the impulse, synaptic bulb, yeah, or synaptic knob, or synaptic terminal, yeah, a few names, and this is the effector. So the effector can be muscle, it can be glands, okay, which secretes enzyme, for example. Um, so there is communication here, yeah. There is communication here between the synapse. So this is called synapse, yeah. Synapse. So there is a particular topic on this synaptic transmission. It's called synaptic transmissions. It means what occurs. What is the communication between neurons and neurons? Neurons at the end of this. What's the communication between the end of this neuron with a muscle? Or it can also be between neurons. So here you can see here, this is from the incoming neurons, which is also motor neurons. Okay, this is also motor neuron. So how do neurons communicate? So they communicate here between a synaptic knob or synaptic bulb or synaptic terminal, yeah, with the cell membrane of the cell body. So this is a topic on its own, which is known as synaptic transmission. Synaptic transmission. Okay, let's look at some of the features. So dendrites, this is to increase the surface area to receive more incoming impulses. Mitochondria, there's a lot of mitochondria here, as you can see. Yeah, 1, 2. Yeah, so this mitochondria is for provide energy for active transport. Active transport of what? Active transport of sodium and potassium pumped. Okay, we'll talk about that later on, maybe not today. Long and thin axon. So this is for to conduct impulses, able to conduct impulses quickly over long distances with a single cell. So imagine if the neurons are very, very short, yeah, if the neurons are very, very short, so you can see they have to pass the message from here to here, and from here to here, and from here to here. So it will take more time. But if it has a long axon, a single cell, a single neuron, long axon, so the information can be transmitted faster. Okay, can be transmitted faster. So that's the meaning of long and thin axon. Yeah, myelin shield. This is electrical insulator. Nodes of Ranvier. This is where there is no myelin shield. This is to speed up. To speed up the conduction of the nerve impulse. So the presence of the nodes of Ranvier allows saltatory conduction. Yeah? Now I'll just give you these names so that tomorrow we can come across with this name, and then you are already familiar. Saltatory. Saltatory means jumping. Saltatory conduction. So the presence of the nodes of Ranvier. Nodes of Ranvier means areas where there is no myelin shield. Yeah, will allow saltatory conduction, meaning it will just, the electrical impulse or the nerve impulse will just jump very, very quickly, okay, in order to reach the effector. That's the purpose of the nodes of Ranvier. So if there is no myelin shield, so let's say there is no myelin shield, okay, if there is no myelin shield, the electrical impulse have to go through this area here, to go all the regions, and then it reaches the effector. So it is slower. But because some exons have myelin shield, and areas where there is no myelin shield is called a node of Ranvier, so the electrical impulse can actually jump like this. Then we reach the effector quickly. Okay? So don't worry about that. This is just an introduction. You will learn more on that. Branch terminal ends of exon, meaning what it means here is that it's just the terminal end. You see here, it has many branches, many branches. Okay, so that's also increased surface area to form synapse with effector. Synaptic bulb, this is, it contains neurotransmitters. Okay, so this is the synaptic bulb here. This is the synaptic bulb. So this is called synaptic bulb. Synaptic bulb. Remember just now, it can be called synaptic knob. It can be called synaptic terminal. Okay. Right. And now we come across the word neurotransmitters. Yeah. So that's why in the earlier lectures, when we look at the table, okay, we mentioned nerve impulse or electrical impulse, and then neurotransmitters. So these are the chemical substances that are being used here in nervous system, as compared to endocrine system. It only uses the term hormones. Okay. So the CNS consists of the brain and the spinal cord. An example of effectors, muscles and glands. And then now we move on to the sensory neuron. Previously we looked at the motor neurons. Okay, remember this motor neuron. Now we look at the sensory neuron. Okay, so sensory neuron, in terms of structure, function is also different. Okay, because function would be to carry nerve impulse from the receptor to the central nervous system. Yeah, central nervous system. As you can see with the motor neuron, it will carry the nerve impulse from the central nervous system to the effector. That's for the motor neuron. Okay, so it's quite different in terms of function. Now structurally, they are also quite different. Okay, they have some similarities. The difference is the positioning of this cell body here is not at one end. Yeah, it's in the middle. Okay, they do have dendrites. They do have the synaptic bulb. They do have the myelin shield, the node of Ranvier. The only difference is the positioning of the cell body here is not at one end. Okay, apart from the function, of course, the cell body is located somewhere in the middle. The rest is the same. Okay, so how the way this goes through is like this. That's how the nerve impulse will go. Yeah, that one direction. Okay, so this go up and then go down, and then we'll send it to the next one. It can be to the next sensory neuron, or this can be to the central nervous system. This is a connector neuron or relay neuron or interneuron. Yeah, or interneuron or relay neuron or connector neuron. Yeah, there are many names. This is very, very important because this is the one that connects. So in the central nervous system, okay, so there is a sensory neuron, and then in the brain, yeah, in the central nervous system, there is a relay neuron in the middle, and then it connects to a motor neuron. So the sensory neuron, of course, is connected with another sensory neuron, maybe millions of this, yeah. And then we have a receptor here, and then we have another motor neuron, okay. And then finally will be effector, okay. So in the central nervous system, that means the brain and the spinal cord, there is a neuron that connects sensory neuron with a motor neuron, yeah, and that is called a relay neuron, and this is only in the CNS, or connector neuron or interneuron. Okay. Okay, common structural features. So they have a lot of in common. Yeah? What are the common structural features? They've got large cell body. They have inside the cell body have Nissl granules. So this is another new term. But actually, Nissl granules are basically rough ER and ribosomes. Rough ER and ribosome. If I can use different color. So Nissl granules. These are actually rough ER and ribosomes. And we all know the function of the rough ER and ribosomes. They make proteins, yeah, which includes neurotransmitters. Okay, and you will come across some new terms like fiber, dendrons, dendrites, axon. Yeah, it says here fibers which extending from the cell body are thin branches of extension which are often referred to collectively as fibers. Fibers conduct impulse towards the cell body is called dendrons. Away from the cell body are called axon. Okay, and then dendrons are bigger. So when dendrites converge, they form dendrons. Just like when arterioles converge, they form artery. When venules converge, they form veins. So when dendrites converge to form dendrons. Okay, classification of neurons in terms of structure. This is not actually in your syllabus, but just to let you know that motor neuron is an example of multipolar neuron. Okay, because it says here many fibers leave the cell body. So if I can just draw here, meaning from here goes here. Okay, so it's like that. So it can be like this. So you can see how it moves. Yeah, so many fibers leave the cell body, so it's called multipolar neuron. Unipolar neuron, like sensory neuron is unipolar because only one fiber leaves the cell body, so it goes here, goes up, and then goes down again. Okay, so see, one leaving the cell body. Okay, so so these are called fiber. Yeah, these are all these names here, all of these are called fibers. This is called fiber, fiber. Yeah, these are all called fibers, but that's the name in general. Yeah, it says here fiber. Extending from the cell body are twin branches or extension, which are often referred to collectively as fiber. Okay, but it has specific names. So, for example, those uh, that carry towards the cell body are called dendrons. Away from the cell body are called axon. Yeah. So this is towards cell body called dendrons. Away from the cell body are known as axon. This is away. Okay. So it says here towards the cell body called dendrons, away from the cell body are called axon. Okay. Right. Let's have a look at other things. These are actually special actual images. You can see the dendrites there. Okay, dendrites. Okay, so in terms of function, okay, we have already looked into this. Yeah, function means from receptor to CNS. This is from the CNS to effector. Dendrites are long, and this one here short dendrites. Information is carried from long dendrites to the cell body. This is from the cell body to a long axon. Cell body is not at the end. This is important. Cell body is at one end. So normally it's in the middle. The cell body is in the middle for the sensory neuron. Okay, myelination or myelin shield or Schwann cells. So this is the axon here. As you can see, it's wrapped by this Schwann cell. Okay, so this Schwann's myelin shield. So it wraps around the myelin shield. The Schwann cell wraps around the myelin shield from the Schwann cell, wraps around the axon, so producing this very thick layer of Schwann cell membranes, which are essentially made up of fats. Yeah, so it provides electrical insulator, meaning electrical impulse cannot pass through this region here. Okay, so the purpose of myelin shield is increasing the transmission of impulse electrics. So so that's what I called just now saltatory conduction. Yeah, saltatory means jumping. Saltatory conduction, myelination and non-myelinated. Now, we have neurons in our body which are myelinated. We also have neurons in our brain which are not myelinated. Okay, so it's normal to have some axons which are myelinated and some axons which are not myelinated. For example, as you can see here, this is myelinated, whereas this one here is not myelinated. This is not myelinated. Okay, so it's normal, but there are of course some conditions. So for example, when a neuron is supposed to be myelinated and when it's not myelinated, yeah, because there are parts in our body where our neurons are myelinated, and if it's not myelinated, then that can be due to a certain disease condition. Yeah? It's called multiple sclerosis. Okay, this is where the myelin shield is lost. Okay, loss of myelin shield. and of course it causes slower conduction of nerve impulse, and that's why you can have blurred vision, loss of coordination, muscle weakness, yeah, and so on. Okay. So where can we find these neurons? So we have studied these motor neurons, sensory neuron. Where can we find them? We find them inside a nerve, yeah, inside a nerve. Even when we look at the table just now, where do we find them? Along nerves. Okay, these motor neuron, sensory neuron, we find them inside nerves. Okay, so as you can see here, this is a nerve, yeah. This is actually part of a nerve. You can see here axons. So all of these are axons. It has blood vessels. This part here is blood vessels here to supply oxygen, yeah, glucose, nutrient, and so on. This one is also a bigger blood vessels. This is a very good example. As you can see, the small here is called axons, yeah, and then there are blood vessels here as well, and these are all inside a big nerve. Now this part here is also, this is an actual one. You can see the myelin shield and the nodes of Ranvier, yeah, nodes of Ranvier, yeah. You can see the nodes of Ranvier, yeah, areas where there is no myelin shield, and you can see the blood vessels here, blood capillary supply blood, yeah, to the motor neuron, sensory neuron, and so on. Okay, now let's look at the reflex arc. So the reflex arc is a very good example to demonstrate motor neuron and sensory neuron, and also to demonstrate the features, yeah, of a reflex arc. Not only a reflex arc, but also to demonstrate this one here, yeah, components of the nervous system. Okay, so a reflex arc is a very good example to demonstrate this, yeah. Reflex arc is a good example to demonstrate what we mean by stimulus, receptor, central nervous system, effector, and then response. I'm pretty sure you have heard of the reflex arc before, and we're going to use it as well in here in the to understand the role of motor neuron, sensory neuron, and so on. Yeah. So as you can see, you need a stimulus. The stimulus, it can be a sharp object, a hot surface. Yeah, it can be anything. Yeah, and then the receptor is found here. It can be a specialized receptor, which we will talk later on, or it can be the end of a, so this receptor here, it can be a specialized one, specialized receptor, or it can be the end of a sensory neuron. So the end of a sensory neuron can be a receptor. Like in this case, yeah. In this case, so normally with this type of receptor, like heat or pain receptor, this is normally the end of a sensory neuron that acts as the receptor. I'll show you later on. Okay, so we have a stimulus, you have a receptor, you need to have a sensory neuron. So this is the sensory neuron. It sends to the central nervous system. And there is a connector neuron here. Okay, see connector neuron or relay neuron or interneuron. And then there's a motor neuron where it hits this muscle. So between muscle different. So this part here, between synapse and muscle, there is communication. Synaptic terminal, synaptic transmission. So between the synapse and the muscle, there is a synaptic transmission. Actually, there is a special name. It's called the neuromuscular junction. Just down here. Why do I tell you here? Because so that when I mention it the next time, you are familiar with already. Neuromuscular junction. Okay, meaning there is communication between the synapse and the cell membrane of the muscle here, and that is something that we're going to study here. Objective number 10, the neuromuscular junction. Okay, and then the synaptic this is synaptic transmission. Synaptic transmission. Okay, so how do neurons communicate? Like how do this sensory neuron communicate with interneuron? So what happens here? Okay, this part here, how do they communicate? This is by synapse, synaptic transmission. And then the same thing with how do this interneuron connects with the motor neuron. Okay, so there's another one here, synaptic transmission. But then this part here is different, whereby how do they communicate the end of a motor neuron with a muscle, and it's called the neuromuscular junction. This is neuromuscular junction. Okay, so that's why it's very, very the reflex arc, it's a very, very good example that can teach you a lot of things. Okay, so as you can see, the sensory neuron, basically it sells the nerve impulse from the receptor to the central nervous system. This is the CNS. And then the connector neuron that communicates between connector neuron receive nerve impulse from the sensory neuron and then pass it to the motor neuron. Okay, and then the motor neuron receive nerve impulse from the CNS, which is via the connector neuron to the effector. Okay, to the effector. So that's how it is done. This is taken from a different textbook. Okay, this one here, it says receptor, stretch receptor. Okay, the problem with this is that it doesn't show you the relay neuron. It's supposed to show you the relay neuron. Here there has to be a relay neuron, just like this one here. So remember, there's a receptor there, and you can see here, this is the relay neuron. Okay, again, interneuron, or also known as relay neuron or connector neuron. Okay, so it can be pain receptor, pressure receptor, or heat receptor. Yeah, many types of receptor. Right, this one as well. Okay, So this is what is meant by the reflex arc. Yeah? A reflex arc is something that you cannot control. Yeah, it is automatic. Yeah, it's automatic, something that you cannot control. Yeah, it says here involuntary. Okay. Now let's look at the next one, and that is we're gonna talk about the different types of this one here. Gonna look at this one. I'm gonna look at the last two here. The role of sensory, yeah? The role of sensory receptor cells, and then we're gonna look at the chemoreceptor cell, yeah, in the taste bud. Just a very quick one. So when we talk about receptors, there are two types of receptors. I did mention this just now: simple receptor and specialized receptors. Okay, so simple receptor, it can be the end of a sensory neuron like this. This is a sensory neuron. Okay, sensory neuron. The one end of a sensory neuron can be the simple receptor, or it can be a specialized cell. Specialized cell. This is the sensory neuron. So this is a specialized cell here, which will pass the impulse to the sensory neuron. Okay, so the simple receptor here can be as like the pain receptor. Yeah, the pain receptor in the reflex arc. That one can be using a simple receptor, or something that is very, very sophisticated, like in your taste buds, in your tongue. It's using a specialized receptor. Okay, and that's how, and this is what is stated in the learning objectives. Yeah, describe. Okay, objective number 5. Describe the sequence of events that result in the action potential in the sensory neuron using a chemoreceptor cell in a human taste bud. Okay, let's have a look. So when it comes with taste, yeah, sweet taste, salty taste, the reaction is very unique. Yeah, every taste has a very specific reaction. So on our taste buds here, as you can see here, taste buds, they are specialized receptor here in our taste buds. Okay, it says here within each taste buds, there are about 50 to 100 specialized receptors which are very sensitive to chemicals. Okay, so you can see here, just looking at one taste buds, yeah, one taste bud, it has many specialized receptor, yeah, in just one taste bud. This is actually one specialized receptor, another one, yeah, another one, and so on. This is in one taste bud. So you see, every reaction, for example, sweet taste, salt taste, sour taste, salt taste, bitter, and umami taste, yeah, it has different reactions. But then the textbook only shows you two reactions, and that is to detect salt and sweet. Okay, to detect salt and sweet. Now you can see here, this is the specialized receptor. Specialized receptor, and this is the sensory neuron. Okay, So what happens is that when you eat something salty, so that is sodium, okay, so that will depolarize the membrane. Depolarize means, you can just keep it in mind. Depolarize, it simply means that there is an action, there is just like the starting point, like a nerve impulse occurs, yeah, in this region here, and then it will move in this direction. That's the meaning of depolarize, yeah, in a nutshell. But of course, it has more meaning to it rather than just simply action pattern, rather than simply there is a nerve impulse. So we will talk about this depolarized tomorrow, yeah. So the entry of sodium, because of the salt, the food that contains salt will depolarize the membrane, and it will stimulate calcium to enter. So if calcium enter, that means inside here becomes more positive. More positive than outside. Okay. Entry of calcium stimulate movement of vesicles and release neurotransmitter exocytosis. So because of calcium enters, sorry, before that, if I can repeat, the entry of sodium here, which means the inside now becomes more positive than outside, okay, than outside. So it depolarizes this membrane here, and so the electrical impulse will move down, okay, and then the arrival of the nerve impulse in this region here will cause calcium to enter, and when calcium enter, then it will cause vesicles to release a neurotransmitter by exocytosis. So this is the neurotransmitter, the vesicle here, and the vesicle will fuse with this membrane and it will release the neurotransmitter, and that neurotransmitter will bind here, and then that causes sodium to enter again, sodium to enter here. So this will depolarize the membrane here, and then the action potential or nerve impulse will travel down. Okay. So nerve impulse is to do with making inside positive, yeah, outside negative. If that's the case, if that happens, then action potential will occur, yeah. Action potential will occur and will travel down. Okay, so like in this case here, as the action potential or the nerve impulse travel down, calcium enter. It causes the vesicle containing neurotransmitter to fuse with this membrane here and then release the neurotransmitter, as it's normally acetylcholine. And then when the acetylcholine binds with the membrane here, so that causes sodium to enter again, sodium to enter again. So inside here it becomes more positive. And so it will depolarize this membrane, and then action potential or nerve impulse will travel down again. So this is for the detection of salt, yeah. So we can just read, yeah, read this part here, the sequence. It says here, describe the event. That means you have to, describe, it says here, the sequence of event results in an action potential in the sensory neuron in the chemoreceptor. So this is one event, and this is to detect salt. But then to detect sweet is different again. Yeah, to detect sweet, it has different mechanism. This is more like cell signaling. Cell signaling. Yeah, cell signaling. The sequence is very similar to cell signaling. Chemicals bind to the receptor, which will activate G protein, which will activate enzyme, which produce cyclic AMP as the second messenger, and the cyclic AMP causes a cascade of chemical reaction. Okay, and then potassium channels are closed. That means the potassium stays inside the cell. The inside becomes more positive than outside, and so depolarization occurs in the membrane. Okay. Now all of this may not make sense to you at the moment, because what is this sodium? What is this potassium channel, and what is this sodium, and what is this calcium? Yeah. Now all of this will make sense to you as we move along. Yeah, as we go along, and as we learn how action potential occurs, we will come back to this slide, and then everything will make sense again. Okay. So I think that's all for today. Please do complete this going through this video, yeah, watching this video, so that tomorrow I can start with how resting potential is maintained, yeah, and how action potential, and how first thing is how action resting potential is maintained, and how action potential occurs in myelinated neuron, and with reference to saltatory conduction. Okay, that's all for today. I'll see you again tomorrow.